雪国川端康成，飞鸽制作飞鸽文学。当我们穿过边境长长的隧道时，我们发现自己来到了一个雪国，夜色深处变成了白色。火车停在信号站。
Snow Country, Kawabata Yasunari. Flying Pigeon Production at Flying Pigeon Literature. As we passed through the long tunnel at the border, we found ourselves in a snowy country. The darkness turned white in the depths of the night. The train stopped at the signal station.
少女从里面的座位上站起来，敲开了岛村面前的玻璃窗。雪花般的冷气袭来。女儿站长先生，站长先生，他探出身子，向着远处喊道：“男人关掉灯。”
The girl stood up from her seat inside and knocked on the glass window in front of Shimamura. A cold air like snowflakes hit me. Mr. Station Master, Mr. Station Master, he leaned out and shouted into the distance. The man turns off the light.
缓缓走了出来，围巾遮住鼻子，帽子的毛垂在耳朵上。岛村望向外面，以为已经这么冷了。
He walked out slowly, his scarf covering his nose and the fur of his hat hanging on his ears. Shimamura looked outside, thinking it was already so cold.
只见山脚下那些像官方铁路建筑一样的营房正冷冷地散着。站长，我很高兴你心情好。啊，你回来了吗？天气又冷了。现在就在这里，谢谢你的帮助。
I saw barracks that looked like official railway buildings at the foot of the mountain, scattered coldly. Station Master, I'm glad you're in a good mood. Ah, are you back? The weather is cold again. You are here now, thank you for your help.
我确信你在这样的地方开始感到孤独，考虑到你还年轻。小时候，站长教会了我很多东西，非常感谢您的宝贵时间。好吧，我工作得很好。
I'm sure you're starting to feel lonely in a place like this, considering how young you are. The webmaster taught me a lot as a kid. Thank you very much for your time. Okay. I'm doing a good job.
从现在开始，我要忙了。去年下了很多雪，发生了很多雪崩。火车被困了，村里的施粥处很忙。站长看起来穿了很多衣服。在我哥哥的信中
I'm going to be busy from now on. It snowed a lot last year. There were a lot of avalanches. Well, the train is stuck and the village soup kitchen is busy. The station master looks like he's wearing a lot of clothes. In my brother's letter.
他还穿着他的马甲。他们不在那儿，我穿着4层和服。天冷的时候，年轻人就喝很多，所以我明天要去明日子。你心情不好，感冒了。
He was still wearing his waistcoat. They're not there, I'm wearing a 4-layer kimono. Young people drink a lot when it's cold. So I'm going to Mingzai tomorrow. You're in a bad mood and have a cold.
“站长用手电筒向宿舍挥了挥手。“小兄弟，你也想喝一杯吗？”“站长，你回来了吗？”“我受伤了，我要去看看医生。”“好吧，我不能。”
The station master waved toward the dormitory with his flashlight. Little brother, do you want to have a drink too? Station master, are you back? I'm injured, I have to go see a doctor. Well, I can't.
穿着日式服装和大衣的站长似乎想尽快结束这场冷漠的谈话，说道：“那么，请照顾好自己。站长，你弟弟不在吗？现在呢？”杨子在雪地里抬头问道：“站长。”
The station master, who was wearing Japanese clothes and coat, seemed to want to end this indifferent conversation as soon as possible and said, "Then, please take care of yourself." Station master, is your brother not here? What now? Yoko was in the snow. He raised his head and asked, Station master.
“请你好好看看我的弟弟。”他的声音悲伤而美丽，声音如此之高，仿佛是从夜雪中传来的。即使火车开动了，他也没有把胸部伸出窗外。
“Please take a good look at my brother.” Her voice was sad and beautiful. The voice was so high that it seemed to come from the night snow. Even though the train was moving, she did not stick her breasts out of the window. 然后站长就走到了铁轨下面。当我追上他时，他说：“站长，请你第二天休息时回家告诉你的兄弟。”“你好。”站长喊道。杨子关上窗户。Then the station master walked under the tracks. When I caught up with him, he said, "Station master, please go home and tell your brother when you have rest the next day." "Hello," the station master shouted. Yoko closed the window. 把手放在通红的脸颊上。那是一座边境山，3个拉塞尔在等待下雪。
隧道南北通电，引发雪崩通知线路已接通。
Put your hands on your red cheeks. It was a border mountain, and 3 Russells were waiting for the snow. The avalanche notification line has been connected due to the power supply to the north and south of the tunnel.
目前已安排派出共计5000名扫雪工和2000名青年消防员。当岛村得知女儿的弟弟杨子一直在即将被雪掩埋的铁路信号站工作时，
A total of 5,000 snow plows and 2,000 young firefighters have been dispatched. When Shimamura learned that his daughter's brother Yoko had been working at a railway signal station that was about to be buried by snow,
从今年冬天开始，他对他的兴趣更加浓厚了。不过，我在这里说女儿，因为岛村就是这么认为的。岛村当然知道他的同伴是什么。没有。
Starting this winter, he became more interested in her. However, I say daughter here, because that's what Shimamura thinks of her, and Shimamura certainly knows what her companion is. No.
他们的手势与已婚夫妇相似，但该男子显然病了。对待病人时，男女之间的距离往往会放松，照顾病人越努力，就越像夫妻。其实
Their gestures were similar to those of a married couple, but the man was clearly ill. When treating patients, the distance between men and women tends to relax, and the harder they work to care for the patient, the more they become like a couple. Actually,
女人对比自己年长的男人孩子气的母爱态度，远远就可以看出夫妻关系。看来是这样，岛村只是孤立他。
the childish motherly attitude of a woman compared to her older man can tell a lot about the relationship between husband and wife. It seems so. Shimamura just isolated her.
并根据她的外表自私地认为她是他的女儿。她是关羽，但这或许是他自己多愁善感的缘故，是他用异样的目光看这个女孩太久的结果。
And selfishly believed she was his daughter based on her appearance. It's about. But this may be due to his own sentimentality, the result of him looking at this girl strangely for too long.
大约3个小时前，岛村出于无聊，用各种方式动了动左手的食指，最后，这个手指是我唯一清晰地记得我要去见的女人了。从那时起，我越是想清楚。
About 3 hours ago, out of boredom, Shimamura moved the index finger of his left hand in various ways. In the end, this finger was the only one I could clearly remember about the woman I was going to see. Since then, the more I think about it,
就越是难以捉摸，随着记忆的衰退变得不可靠。我的指尖仍然被女人的触碰所湿润，我感觉自己离那个遥远的女人越来越近。我觉得很奇怪。
More elusive, as the memory fades and becomes unreliable, my fingertips are still wet from the woman's touch, and I feel myself getting closer to that distant woman. I feel strange.
当我把它放在鼻子上，试图闻一闻时，突然发现我的手指在车窗玻璃上有一条线。当它向后拉时，女人的一只眼睛清晰地突出了。
When I put it to my nose and tried to smell it, I suddenly noticed a line on the car window with my finger. When he pulled back, one of the woman's eyes stood out clearly.
他惊讶得差点哭出来，但那是因为他的心思在自己的房间里很远。当他注意到的时候，那只是坐在另一边的那个女人的照片。外面已是黄昏。
He was so surprised that he almost cried. But that's because his mind was far away in his room, and when he noticed it, it was just a picture of the woman sitting on the other side. It's dusk outside.
火车内灯火通明，于是窗玻璃就变成了镜子。然而，由于蒸汽的热量，玻璃完全被蒸汽浸湿了，直到我用手指擦拭才看清镜子。
The train is brightly lit. The window pane then becomes a mirror. However, due to the heat of the steam, the glass was completely soaked with steam and I couldn't see the mirror clearly until I wiped it with my finger.
女儿的一只眼睛相当漂亮，但当岛村把脸贴到窗户上时，突然看到她脸上露出悲伤的表情，似乎是想看夕阳，用手掌摩擦着玻璃。女孩歪着头。
One of her daughter's eyes was quite beautiful, but when Shimamura pressed his face against the window, he suddenly saw a sad expression on his face, as if he wanted to watch the sunset and rubbed the glass with his palms. The girl tilted her head.
目光专注地看着躺在自己面前的男人，从他肩膀的紧张看得出来，他很认真，连眼睛都没眨一下。男人靠在窗边当枕头，双腿弯曲在女儿身边。
He looked intently at the man lying in front of him. You could tell from the tension in his shoulders that he was serious and didn't even blink. The man leaned against the window as a pillow, his legs bent beside his daughter.
这是3等车厢，我的座位不是岛村的正旁边，而是在他前面座位的另一侧，所以我只能在镜子里看到那个男人的脸到耳朵。女孩斜对着岛村。
This is a third-class carriage. My seat was not directly next to Shimamura, but on the other side of the seat in front of him, so I could only see the man's face to his ears in the mirror. The girl looked diagonally towards Shimamura.
所以他可以直接看到他，但是当他们上了火车时，当我低头一看，惊讶于女孩的冷艳和刺眼的美丽时
So he could see her directly, but when they got on the train. When I looked down, I was surprised by the girl's cold and dazzling beauty.
我看到了蓝黄色的男人的手牢牢地握着女孩的手，所以岛村觉得再看向那个方向不太好。镜子里的男人表情平静，似乎很平静。
I saw the blue-yellow man's hand holding the girl's hand firmly, so Shimamura felt that it was not good to look in that direction again. The man in the mirror has a calm expression and seems very calm.
因为他已经在看着女儿的胸口了。尽管他的体力很弱，但他却散发出一种甜蜜的和谐。将围巾放在枕头上，将其拉到鼻子下方，捂住嘴。
Because he was already looking at his daughter's chest. Although he is physically weak, he exudes a sweet harmony. Place the scarf on the pillow, pull it under your nose and cover your mouth.
然后以咬夹的方式包住脸颊，但是围巾会松动或盖住鼻子。男人的目光还没来得及移动，女孩就用温柔的双手定住了他。
Then wrap your cheeks in a cheek-biting manner. However, scarves can come loose or cover the nose. Before the man's gaze could move, the girl fixed it with gentle hands.
同样的事情，两人重复了很多次，看得岛村有些恼火。此外，包裹着男人双腿的斗篷下摆有时会打开并悬垂下来。
The two of them repeated the same thing many times, which made Shimamura a little annoyed. Additionally, the hem of the cloak that wraps around a man's leg sometimes opens and hangs down.
我女儿立即注意到了这一点，并修复了它。这些事情真的很自然。就这样，两人仿佛在无尽地走向远方， 忘记了距离的概念。因此
My daughter noticed this immediately and fixed it. These things are really natural. In this way, the two of them seem to be walking endlessly into the distance, forgetting the concept of distance. Therefore,
岛村并没有感受到观看悲伤的痛苦，反而感觉自己在观看梦境的机智。或许是因为发生在神秘的镜子之中，镜子的底部流淌着夕阳的景色。
rather than feeling the pain of watching grief, Shimamura feels like he is watching the mechanics of a dream. Maybe it's because it happened in a mysterious mirror. The scenery of the sunset flows at the bottom of the mirror.
换句话说，映照出来的东西和镜子一起移动，就像电影中的复制品一样。人物和背景没有任何联系。更重要的是，人物是半透明的，转瞬即逝的。
In other words, what is reflected moves with the mirror, like a replica in a movie. There is no connection between the characters and the background. More importantly, characters are translucent and ephemeral.
风景是黄昏的模糊流动，当这两者融合在一起时，他们创造了一个超出我所画世界的象征世界。
The landscape is a blurry flow of dusk, and when the two come together they create a symbolic world beyond the world I paint.
岛村尤其被田野灯中央照亮的女孩的脸庞难以形容的美丽所感动。远处的山天还残留着淡淡的夕阳余晖。
Shimamura was especially moved by the indescribable beauty of the girl's face illuminated in the center of the field lamp. There is still a faint afterglow of the sunset in the distant mountain sky.
透过窗玻璃看到的风景，在远处也仿佛消失了，不存在，但已经失去了色彩。无论走多远，平凡的田野和山峦都显得更加平凡。
The scenery seen through the window pane seemed to disappear in the distance. Does not exist. But it has lost its color. No matter how far you go, the ordinary fields and mountains seem more ordinary.
根本无法引起人们的注意，取而代之的是巨大的流动情绪。当然，那是因为里面映出了我女儿的脸，虽然映照出她身影的部分看不到窗外。
It doesn't attract people's attention at all. Instead, it's a huge flow. Mood. Of course, that's because my daughter's face is reflected in it. Although the part reflecting her figure cannot be seen outside the window,
但傍晚的景色却在不断地围绕着女儿的轮廓移动，所以透过窗户可以看到她的脸，感觉就像是光一样。但是否真正透明是由脸的背面决定的。
But the evening scene kept moving around the outline of my daughter, so that her face, visible through the window, felt like light. But whether it is truly transparent or not is determined by the back of the face.
我幻想着一望无际的日落景色就从我的脸上掠过，却找不到合适的时间去看。火车里面不是很亮，也不像真正的镜子那么坚固。
I imagined that the endless sunset scenery would pass by my face, but I couldn't find the right time to see it. It's not very bright inside the train, and it's not as solid as a real mirror.
没有任何反应，所以当岛村凝视着他时，他渐渐忘记了还有一面镜子。在我看来，他的女儿仿佛漂浮在傍晚的景色中。那一刻，他的脸上绽放出光芒。
Nothing is reflected. So, as Shimamura stared at it, he gradually forgot that there was a mirror, and it seemed to me that his daughter was floating in the evening scenery. At that moment, her face lit up.
这面镜子里的影像还不足以熄灭窗外的灯，光线并没有抹去图像。然后光线穿过他的脸，但他并没有让自己的脸发光。那是一道寒冷而遥远的光。
The image in this mirror was not enough to extinguish the light outside the window. The light does not erase the image. Then the light passed through her face, but she didn't let her face shine. It was a cold and distant light.
小眼睛周围隐约亮起光芒。当女孩的双眼与火光重叠的那一刻，她的眼睛神秘而美丽，在暮色的波涛间漂浮着，是一只夜光虫。
There was a faint light around the little eyes. When the girl's eyes overlapped with the firelight, her eyes were mysterious and beautiful, floating among the waves of twilight, like a nocturnal luminous insect.
杨子不可能注意到有人这样看着他，他只是被病人迷住了。但即使他转身看岛村，也看不到窗玻璃上他的倒影。
Yoko couldn't possibly notice someone looking at her like that. She was just fascinated by the patient, but even if she turned to look at Shimamura, she couldn't see her reflection in the window pane.
我也不会停下来看看那个男人看着窗外。岛村之所以在长时间监视杨子的过程中忘记了自己对他的不满，
nor would I stop and watch the man look out the window. The reason why Shimamura forgot his dissatisfaction with Yoko while monitoring her for a long time.
很可能是因为他被西洋镜的虚幻力量俘获了，所以当他喊站长，并向他展示一些过于严肃的东西时，他可能首先对未知的故事感兴趣。然而
Most likely because he was captured by the illusory power of the sunset mirror. So when she called out to the webmaster and showed him something too serious, she was probably first interested in the unknown story. However,
大约半小时后，杨子和他的朋友竟然和岛村在同一个车站下车了。他想，是不是又出什么事了？我回头一看，好像与这件事有关。
About half an hour later, Yoko and her friend got off at the same station as Shimamura. He wondered if something had happened again. I looked back and saw that it seemed to be related to this incident. 但当我接触到的时候，伴随着普拉特论坛的寒冷，我突然为自己在火车上的失礼感到羞愧。我继续回头看，从机车前面经过。But when I was exposed to it, along with the coldness of the Pratt Forum, I suddenly felt ashamed of my impoliteness on the train. I continued to look back and passed in front of the locomotive. 当这名男子抓住杨子的肩膀，并试图走下铁轨时，一名车站工作人员举起手阻止了他。最终，一列长长的货运列车从黑暗中出现，遮住了两人。When the man grabbed Yoko's shoulders and tried to walk off the tracks, a station worker put up his hand to stop him. Eventually, a long freight train emerged from the darkness, covering the two men. 客栈的经理一身雪白的服装，就像是火灾现场的消防员。他的耳朵被塞住，穿着橡胶靴。The manager of the inn is dressed in snow-white clothes, just like a firefighter at a fire scene. His ears were plugged and he wore rubber boots. 站在候车室窗外望着铁轨的女人也穿着蓝色斗篷和兜帽。岛村在火车里还很温暖，并没有感受到外面真正的寒冷。The woman standing outside the waiting room window looking at the tracks was also wearing a blue cloak and hood. Shimamura was still warm in the train and did not feel the real cold outside. 但由于这是他第一次在雪国经历冬天，一开始我被人的外表吓到了。
真的冷到可以穿成这样吗？嘿，我们已经准备过冬了。雪后的晚上。
But since this was his first time experiencing winter in the snowy country, I was initially intimidated by the appearance. Is it really cold enough to dress like this? Hey, we are ready for the winter. At night after the snow.
天气变冷之前，天气特别冷。今晚温度低于冰点吧？岛村看着屋檐边可爱的冰柱说道。旅馆的经理和车子驶近了。
It was extremely cold before the weather got colder. Tonight. The temperature is below freezing, right? Shimamura said, looking at the cute icicles on the eaves, as the hotel manager and the car approached. Tower.
雪的颜色让低矮的屋顶显得更加低矮，村庄仿佛正在沉入谷底。我明白了，无论你摸什么，都更冷。去年气温是-20度，雪呢？通常有7-8英尺。
The color of the snow made the low roofs appear even lower, and the village seemed to be sinking to the bottom. I understand, no matter what you touch, it's colder. Last year, the temperature was -20 degrees. Where's the snow? Well, usually 7 or 8 feet.
但有时会超过2-3英尺。快要下雪了，这场雪快要下了。现在只下了大约1英尺的雨，但已经开始解冻了。我们不知道什么时候会再次下大雪。
But sometimes it's more than 2 or 3 feet. It's going to snow. This snow is about to fall. It's only rained about a foot now, but it's starting to thaw. We don't know when we're going to get heavy snow again.
那是12月初，岛村原本被风吹得鼻塞的鼻子一下子就穿过了脑袋的鼻窦，他在水里泡了一泡，把所有的污垢都硬生生地洗掉了。
It was early December. Shimamura's nose, which was originally blocked by the wind, suddenly passed through the sinuses in his head. He took a dip in the water and washed away all the dirt.
你和你的女儿还在吗？是的，我在车站，但我没有看到你。川是这样吗？我稍后再给你打电话。今天晚上，我说我主人的儿子要乘末班车回家。
Are you and your daughter still there? Yes, I was at the station, but I didn't see you. Where is that so? I'll call you later. Tonight. I said my master's son was going home on the last train.
所以他出去接她。在傍晚的景色中，病人正在吃着糖果安慰。他是来迎接他的女人的儿子。当我意识到这一点时，我的心里仿佛有什么东西流过。
So he went out to pick him up. In the evening scene, the patient was eating candy for comfort. He was the son of the woman who came to greet him. When I realized this, something seemed to flow through my heart.
但这件事，他并没有觉得这一切有多么奇怪。太奇怪了，我觉得很奇怪，不知为何。
But this matter, he didn't find it all that strange. It's so weird, I feel weird. Do not know why.
岛村想知道那个用手指记忆的女人和那个点亮他眼中的灯的女人之间会发生什么。我感觉自己能在心里的某个地方看到她。
Shimamura wonders what will happen between the woman who remembers with her fingers and the woman who lights up the lamp in his eyes. I feel like I can see it somewhere in my mind.
不知我是否还没有从西洋镜中醒来？那落日的流淌，或许就是时间流逝的象征。他自言自语道：“滑雪季节到来之前，温泉旅馆是人最少的时候。”
I wonder if I haven't woken up from the sunset mirror yet. The flow of the setting sun may be a symbol of the passage of time. He said to himself. Before the ski season, hot spring hotels are the least crowded.
当岛村从室内浴场上来的时候，大家都已经睡着了。古老的走廊让他每走一步，玻璃门都会发出轻微的叮当声。长长的柜台一角。
When Shimamura came out of the indoor bath, everyone was already asleep. The ancient corridor made the glass doors jingle slightly with every step he took. A corner of the long counter.
一名女子高高的站着，下摆铺在冰冷、黑亮的柜台上。当我看到她的下摆时，我吓了一跳，想知道她是否终于以艺妓的身份出现了。
A woman stood tall, her skirt spread on the cold, black counter. When I saw her hem, I jumped and wondered if she was finally showing up as a geisha.
但当她向我走来时，她体内的某种东西崩溃了。从她一动不动地站着的样子，我甚至能感觉到她是认真的。远远的，她就匆匆离去。
But as she came toward me, something inside her broke, and from the way he stood so still, I could even tell he meant it. Far away, he hurried away.
但站在女人身边，他却始终保持着沉默。女人脸色苍白，试图微笑，结果却变成了一张泪流满面的脸。于是两人什么也没说，就往房间里走去。
But standing next to the woman, he always remained silent. The woman looked pale and tried to smile, but it turned into a tearful face, so the two of them walked into the room without saying anything.
即使发生了那样的事情，他也没有寄信，没有来参加会议，也没有履行承诺，给他寄一本关于舞蹈图案的书。岛村会以为他是这样的。
Even though that happened, she didn't send letters, didn't come to meetings, and didn't fulfill her promise to send her a book about dance patterns. Shimamura would think he was.
刚刚笑了就忘记了，所以岛村的第一条命令就是道歉或者给出一个充分的理由。但是他的脸，即使他没有看他就走着，他意识到他并没有责备他。
He just laughed and forgot about it, so Shimamura's first order was to apologize or give a good reason, but his face. Even though she walked without looking at him, he realized that she didn't blame him.
而是有一种感觉，渴望遍布他的全身。所以，无论他做什么，他的话只会给人留下更不诚实的印象。我心里想着，心中充满了分心的甜蜜喜悦。他
Instead, there was a feeling of longing that spread throughout her body. So, no matter what he does, his words will only come across as more dishonest. I thought to myself, filled with the sweet joy of distraction. She.
但是当我到达楼梯底部时，这是最记得你的人。他说，突然伸出左拳，伸出食指，正对着女人。呼！女人抓住他的手指，不放手，就往楼梯上走。
But when I reached the bottom of the stairs, this is the one who remembers you the most, he said, suddenly extending his left fist and pointing his index finger at the woman. Sue. The woman grabbed his finger and walked up the stairs without letting go. 当我在火光下松开他的手时，他立刻就红到了脖子。为了掩饰，他又赶紧把它戴上，拉起他的手，说道：“这就是你记得的吗？不是那个，是这个。” When I let go of her hand in the firelight, she immediately blushed to her neck. In order to hide it, she quickly put it on again. She took his hand and said, "Is this what you remember?" "It's not that, it's this." "
他一边说着，一边从女人的手掌间抽出右手，放到了火坑里，然后再次伸出了左拳。他看上去很悲伤。是的，我知道。他微笑着说道，摊开岛村的手掌。
As he spoke, he took his right hand out of the woman's palm, placed it in the fire pit, and then stretched out his left fist again. She looked sad. Yes, I know, he said with a smile, spreading Shimamura's palm.
将脸贴在上面。你还记得这个吗？我从来没有见过这么冷的头发。东京还没下雪吗？你当时是这么说的，但是终究是谎言。否则谁会在年底呢？
Put your face on it. Do you remember this? I have never seen such cold hair. It hasn't snowed in Tokyo yet? That's what you said at the time, but it was a lie after all. Otherwise, who will be at the end of the year?
你为什么要来这么冷的地方？那时，雪崩的危险期已经过去，正是登山的新绿季节。饭菜上很快就不会再看到木通的新芽了。
Why did you come to such a cold place? At that time, the dangerous period of avalanches has passed, and it is the new green season for mountaineering. You will soon no longer see the new shoots of akebia on your meals.
岛村这个游手好闲的人，往往会失去对自己的严肃感，所以想要把他拉回来，需要花费很大的力气。我经常一个人在山里徒步。
Shimamura, a idle person, often loses his sense of seriousness about himself, so it takes a lot of effort to bring him back. I often hike alone in the mountains.
那天晚上，我从边境山上下来，7天来第一次泡温泉。他让我去叫艺妓，不过那天是修路竣工的庆祝活动，村里的蚕茧库和戏房被用作宴会厅。
That night I came down from the border mountain and took a dip in the hot springs for the first time in 7 days. He asked me to call the geisha. However, that day was a celebration of the completion of the road construction, and the village's cocoon warehouse and theater room were used as a banquet hall.
所以参加的艺妓人数大约有3个，人手不够。所以他们拿的钱不多，但如果他们是主人家的女儿，即使他们去参加宴会，也会得到2-3支舞。
So there were about 12 or 3 geishas participating, which was not enough manpower. So they don't get much money, but if they are the master's daughter, even if they go to the banquet, they will get 2 or 3 dances.
他说他就这样，把他给我看，然后离开，这样也许他会来。岛村再问，住在三味线和舞蹈大师家里的那个女孩并不是艺妓。
He said that was all he was. Show it to me and leave, and maybe he will come. Shimamura asked again. The girl who lived in the house of the shamisen dance master was not a geisha.
但有时会被要求在大型宴会上表演，因为有很多年纪大的女孩没有办个舞会，不想站起来跳舞。女孩子很受宠，经常去客栈的客房。
But sometimes I am asked to perform at large banquets because there are many older girls who don't have half a ball. I don't want to stand up and dance. Girls are very popular and often go to the guest room of the inn.
虽然他不是单独出现在节目中，但也不能称为完全素人，而且，女仆的解释大致是这样的：女人给人的印象是出奇的干净。
Although she does not appear alone in the show, she cannot be called a complete amateur, and the maid's explanation was roughly this. The impression given by women is that they are surprisingly clean.
似乎连脚趾底的凹陷处都干净了。岛村不知道是不是因为自己的眼睛才看到了山里的初夏。她的穿着有点像艺妓，但裙摆当然没有扭曲。
It seems that even the depressions at the bottom of the toes are clean. Shimamura didn't know if it was because of his own eyes that he saw the early summer in the mountains. She's dressed a bit like a geisha, but the hem of her skirt is certainly not twisted.
而且她穿着一件柔软的单排扣长袍，腰带似乎跪得不合时宜，显得相当端庄。聊完山，女仆就起身离开了。
And she wore a soft single-breasted gown. The belt seemed unreasonably expensive and rather demure. After talking about the mountain, the maid got up and left.
但那个女人几乎不知道这个村子里能看到的山的名字。那个出生在这个雪国的女人，喝酒的时候喝的是清酒，酒精。
But the woman barely knew the names of the mountains visible from the village. The woman who was born in this snow country drinks sake when she drinks alcohol.
我本来打算最终成为日本舞蹈大师，但在年中我发现我的丈夫去世了。我说实话。然而
I had planned to eventually become a Japanese dance master, but midway through the year I found out that my husband had passed away. Be honest. However,
从他失去那个人到今天发生的事情，也许是他的真实故事，但我觉得我无法向他倾诉。他说他19岁了。如果不是谎言的话，岛村第一次感到放松。
What happened from when she lost that man to today may be her true story, but I feel like I can't tell him. He said he was 19 years old. If it wasn't a lie, Shimamura felt relaxed for the first time.
因为他19岁看起来像21岁、2岁。他谈论歌舞伎，当他走近她时，他发现这个女人对歌舞伎了解更多，演员的风格和行踪都比不上他。
Because he was 19 and looked 21, 2 years old, he talked about kabuki. When he got closer to him, he found that the woman knew more about kabuki. No actor can match his style or whereabouts.
也许他很渴望有人可以倾诉。当我们交谈的时候，他开始表现出花柳凯的那种女性气质。看来他什么都知道这个男人的感受。无论如何，
Perhaps she was longing for someone to talk to, and as we talked, she began to exhibit the same kind of femininity that Hua Lukai had. It seemed like she knew everything about this man's feelings. Anyway.
他从一开始就知道对方是个素人，而且他已经有1个星期左右没有真正和任何人说过话了，所以他不想和任何人说话。
He knew from the beginning that the other person was a stranger, and he hadn't really spoken to anyone in a week or so, so he didn't want to talk to anyone.
心里有一种温暖的怀念感。一开始，我对这个女人有一种有意的感觉。大山的感伤向女人伸出了手。第二天下午，女子将热水器皿留在外面走廊上。
There is a warm feeling of nostalgia in my heart. At first I had a feeling of friendship towards this woman. The mountain of sentimentality reaches out to the woman. The next afternoon, the woman left the hot water vessel on the corridor outside.
前往他的房间探望。还没等他坐下，他突然让他照顾艺妓。照顾我，我知道，对吧？不，亲爱的。女人说着，转身离开了窗户。我站起来，看着边境的山。
Visit him in his room. Before she could sit down, he suddenly asked her to take care of the geisha. Look after me? I know, right? No, honey, the woman said, turning away from the window. I stood up and looked at the mountains on the border.
但我的脸颊变红了， 我说，这里没有这个人。说谎似的，我转身坐在窗边说道，我不会强迫你做任何事情，这取决于意见。我们根本不说话。这是真的。
But my cheeks turned red and I said, there is no such person here. Lie. Yes, I said, turning around and sitting by the window. I won't force you to do anything. It's up to the geisha. We don't talk at all. This is real.
我认为你应该打电话给某人，并直接与他们交谈。请帮我一个忙。我为什么要这么做？我把你当作朋友，这是你应得的吗？
I think you should call someone and talk to them directly. Please do me a favor. Why should I do this? I consider you a friend. Do you deserve this?
女人在听到邀请时孩子气地说，但随后她吐了口唾沫，又出来了，以便我觉得这很好。我在山里变强了，这不是很清楚吗？
The woman said childishly at the invitation, but then she spat out again. So that, I think this is good. I became stronger in the mountains, isn't that clear?
我只是不能空着头脑谈论它。女人垂下眼皮，沉默了。岛村已经揭露了男人的厚颜无耻，但女人却有点头表示理解的习惯。
I just can't talk about it empty-headed. The woman lowered her eyelids and fell silent. Shimamura had already exposed the man's shamelessness, but the woman had a habit of nodding her head to express understanding.
我想这已经是根深蒂固了，大概是睫毛浓密的缘故，他的眼神低垂了。当岛村注视着他时，我的脸又微微晃动起来。
I think it's ingrained in me. Probably because of her thick eyelashes, her eyes were lowered. When Shimamura looked at her, my face swayed slightly again.
你喜欢怎么称呼我就怎么称呼我。我想这是我第一次来这里，所以我不知道是否有人漂亮。叫我漂亮吧。我喜欢年轻人，如果你说话声音不大的话。
Call me whatever you like. I think this is my first time here, so I don't know if anyone is pretty. Call me pretty. I like young people. If you don't speak loudly.
可能会少犯一些错误。好的，它是模糊的，而不是肮脏的。如果我想说话，我会和你说话。我不会再来了。 你个白痴！哦，我不来了，你来干什么？
Might make fewer mistakes. Okay, it's fuzzy rather than dirty. If I want to talk, I'll talk to you. I won't come again. You idiot. Oh, I'm not coming. Why are you here?
我只是想和你有一个随意的关系，所以我不会追求你。我会感到震惊。如果发生这种情况，我明天就不想看到你的脸了。这可能会发生。
I just want to have a casual relationship with you, so I won't pursue you. I would be shocked. If this happens, I don't want to see your face tomorrow. This may happen.
不会再有骑马了。你既然从山里出来，到了村子里，与人友善，就不跟我说话了。毕竟我是一个旅行者，对吗？是的，是的。
There will be no more riding. Since you came out of the mountains and arrived in the village, you are friendly to people and don't talk to me anymore. After all, I am a traveler, right? Yes, yes.
即使我以后遇到一个你鄙视的女人，我也会感到不舒服。如果她是他选择的人，那就更好了。我不知道，他说，然后转过身去。是的，每个人都是这样的。
Even if I meet a woman you despise in the future, I will feel uncomfortable. It would be better if she was the one he chose. I don't know, he said, and turned away. Yeah, everybody does.
出生在港口，这里一定是温泉圣地。坦言，我们的顾客大部分都是旅行者。我还是个孩子，但我听过很多人的故事。当我看着他的时候
Born in port. This must be a hot spring resort. Frankly speaking, most of our customers are travelers. I am still a child, but I have heard many people's stories. When I look at it,
我发现我对那些我莫名其妙喜欢的人，但当时甚至没有说我喜欢的人感到怀念。我无法忘记他。显然，这就是我们分手后发生的事情。
I find that I miss people who I inexplicably liked, but didn't even say I liked at the time. I can't forget it. Apparently that's what happened after we broke up.
通常是那个记得我并给我写信的人。女人从窗边起身，轻轻地坐在窗下的榻榻米上，看上去像是在回望遥远的日子。
It's usually the person who remembers me and writes to me. The woman stood up from the window and sat gently on the tatami under the window. It looks like I'm looking back at distant days.
他的脸色突然变得像坐在岛村身边一样。女人的声音充满了现实感，岛村几乎感到内疚，认为他毫不费力地欺骗了他。但他没有说谎。
His expression suddenly changed as if he were sitting next to Shimamura. The woman's voice was full of reality, and Shimamura almost felt guilty, thinking that he had deceived her effortlessly. But he didn't lie.
反正女人都是业余的，他不需要向这个女人询问他对女人的渴望，他就能轻松得逞。她太干净了。从我看到她的那一刻起，我就把这个和她分开了。
Women are amateurs anyway. He didn't need to ask this woman about his desire for a woman. He could easily get it. She is so clean. From the moment I saw him, I separated this from her. 而且避暑胜地他也苦恼，所以他就想着带着家人来这个温泉村。如果你这样做了，你的妻子就会成为一个很好的玩伴，因为她是一个业余爱好者。And he was also worried about the summer resort, so he thought of taking his family to this hot spring village. If you do this, your wife will make a great playmate because she is a dilettante. 而你也可以在无聊的时候学习一种舞蹈。我认真的这么想。尽管他对她有某种有意的感觉，但他所涉的水域却是那么浅。当然。And you can also learn a dance when you are bored. I seriously think so. Although he had some feelings of friendship for her, the waters he was wading in were so shallow. Certainly. 这里应该也有一面镜子，可以看到岛村的夜景。她不是唯一一个讨厌现在生活暧昧的女人被毁的人。There should also be a mirror here to see the night view of Shimamura. He is not the only one who hates the destruction of women whose lives are ambiguous now. 但他的脸就像黄昏时火车车窗里女人的脸的倒影一样不真实。也许他正在看向别处。他对西方舞蹈的兴趣也是如此。岛村在东京市中心长大。But his face was as unreal as the reflection of a woman's face in a train window at dusk. Maybe he was looking away. So was his interest in Western dance. Shimamura grew up in central Tokyo.
所以他从小就熟悉歌舞伎表演，但作为一名学生，他的口味偏向于舞蹈和手势。当这种情况发生时，我做了一件事，因为我不愿意掌握日本舞蹈。
So he was familiar with kabuki performances from a young age, but as a student his taste skewed toward dance and gestures, and when that happened, I did something. Because I don't want to master Japanese dance.
所以我翻遍了旧记录，拜访了校长，最终在日本舞蹈中遇到了新面孔。我实质开始写研究和评论文章，自然的。
So I dug through old records, visited the principal, and ended up meeting new faces in Japanese dance. I even started writing research and review articles naturally.
我对日本舞蹈的传统沉睡和新尝试的自我放纵感到深深的不满，我已经无能为力，只能全身心投入到运动中。之后，他被年轻的日本舞者接近。
I felt deeply dissatisfied with the slumber of tradition and the self-indulgence of new endeavors in Japanese dance, and there was nothing I could do but devote myself to the movement. Afterwards, he is approached by a young Japanese dancer.
他突然转向西方舞蹈，我根本不再看日本舞蹈了。相反，他收集了西方舞蹈的书籍和照片。
He suddenly switched to Western dance and I stopped watching Japanese dance at all. Instead, he collected books and photographs of Western dance.
甚至不遗余力地从国外购买了 Bosta 和 Progasm。这不仅仅是我对外国和未知事物的好奇。
Even going to great lengths to buy Bosta and Progusum from abroad. It's not just my curiosity about foreign and unknown things.
我新发现的快乐是不能亲眼看到西方人跳舞。岛村对日本人表演的西洋舞蹈毫无兴趣，就证明了这一点。
My newfound joy was not being able to see Westerners dancing in person. This is demonstrated by Shimamura's lack of interest in Western dance performed by the Japanese.
没有什么比根据西方印刷材料来写西方舞蹈更容易的了。你看不到的舞蹈是绝无仅有的，没有什么理论，只有一首天诗。虽然称为研究。
Nothing is easier than writing about Western dance based on Western printed material. The dance you don't see is unique. There is no theory, only a heavenly poem. Although it is called research.
但那是一种自私的想象，不是欣赏舞者活生生的身体所表演的舞蹈艺术，而是对西方文字和照片的研究。他在观看自己想象的舞蹈的幻想。
But that is a selfish imagination, not appreciating the dance art performed by the living bodies of dancers, but a study of Western texts and photos. He was watching a vision of his own imaginary dance.
就像渴望一份未知的爱情。更重要的是，因为他偶尔写一些西方舞蹈，所以他被认为是一个新手作家，虽然他对此嗤之以鼻。
Like longing for an unknown love. What's more, because he occasionally wrote about Western dance, he was considered a novice writer, although he scorned this.
但有时这也算是他失业职业的一种安慰。他关于日本舞蹈和其他事情的故事，帮助这个女人更接近他。
But sometimes it's a consolation for his jobless career. His stories about Japanese dances and other things help the woman get closer to him.
这是很长一段时间以来第一次这些知识实际上是有用的，尽管这是真的，岛村可能不知不觉地把女人变成了西方舞者。
This is the first time in a long time that this knowledge is actually useful, although it's true that Shimamura may have unknowingly turned women into Western dancers.
所以，当我看到我那苍白忧郁的话语似乎触及了一个女人生命中的要害时，我几乎为自己欺骗了她而感到愧疚。但是，下次我带我的家人过来。
So when I see that my pale melancholy words seem to touch upon a vital point in a woman's life, I almost feel guilty that I have deceived her, but, well, next time I bring my family over.
我就可以和你一起玩得很舒服了。是的，我现在明白了，女人微笑着说道。她看起来有点像艺妓。她说，我也喜欢这样，而且可以持续很长时间。
I can play comfortably with you. Yes, I understand now, the woman said, smiling. She looked a bit like a geisha. I like that too, and it lasts a long time, he said.
所以请给我打电话。现在。是啊。静雅，你不能在中午说任何话，对吗？我不想留下任何碎片。你做错了。光看村里的情况是不会知道的。女人语气严肃。
So please give me a call. Now, yes. Surprise, you can't say anything at noon, right? I don't want to leave any fragments. You did something wrong. You wouldn't know it just by looking at the situation in the village. The woman said in a serious tone.
似乎不合时宜，一再强调自己不在那里。当岛村对此表示怀疑时，这位女士很生气，但还是屈服了，回到了她的家，尽管这取决于艺妓的意愿。
It seemed out of place, repeatedly emphasizing that he was not there. When Shimamura expressed doubts about this, the woman was angry, but gave in and returned to her home, although it was up to the geisha's wishes.
如果你过夜，那是艺妓的责任，他们不会关心什么发生在你身上。但如果你来到我家，无论你走到哪里，主人都有责任跟随你。
If you stay overnight, that's the geisha's responsibility. They won't care about anything happen to you, but if you come to my house, it is the owner's responsibility to follow you wherever you go.
他说唯一的区别是他看到了。你的责任是什么？是生孩子还是生病？岛村对他愚蠢的问题苦笑了一下。
He said the only difference was that he saw it. What is your responsibility? Is it to give birth to a child or to be sick? Shimamura smiled bitterly at his stupid question.
心想这个村子里可能存在这样的无忧无虑的故事。他是个游手好闲的人，也许是因为他有一种天生的保护欲，他对所到之处的人气本能的敏感。
I thought there might be such a carefree story in this village. He is a layabout, perhaps because he has a natural protectiveness and is instinctively sensitive to the popularity of wherever he goes.
但当他从山上下来时，我却被美景的宁静所震撼。国谷之里，当我在旅馆询问时，我发现这是这个雪国最美丽的居住地。
But as he came down the mountain, I was struck by the tranquility of the view. When I inquired at the hotel in Kanoka no Sato, I found out that this is the most beautiful place to live in this snow country.
据说是世界上最容易居住的村庄之一。据说，在近几年铁路开通之前，这里主要是农民的温泉浴场。
It is said to be one of the easiest villages to live in the world. It is said that before the opening of the railway in recent years, it was mainly a hot spring bath for farmers.
一级居住的房子就像是一家餐厅或一家百子店， 门脸已经褪色，但当你看到老式的帐子屏风时，你会发现它们吸引着顾客，不知道是否有这样的。
The house where the geisha lives is like a restaurant or a shirataki shop. The curtains have faded, but when you see the old-fashioned shoji screens, you will see that they attract customers. I wonder if there are such.
甚至还有一些日常的。杂货店和糖果店只有一个员工，店主们除了在店里干活外，显然还在地里干活。或许是因为她是老爷家的女儿。
There are even some everyday ones. The grocery store and candy store had only one employee, and the owners apparently worked in the fields in addition to working in the store. Maybe it's because she is the master's daughter.
有时也会有没有驾照的女孩去参加宴会。我想，即使他们帮忙，艺妓也不会责怪他们。那么，有多少艺妓？也许有12个或3个。你想给谁打电话？
Sometimes girls without a driver's license go to parties. I guess even if they helped, the geisha wouldn't blame them. So, how many geisha are there? Maybe 12 or 3. Who do you want to call?